Hello, welcome back to another episode of Front End Live. I am your host, James Wilkinson, a seasoned front-end developer here to share with you my thoughts and processes when it comes to making things, so that we can give you a little bit more information on, how seniors work inside their heads, right? Last week, we talked about classes and functional React components. And I realized I didn't actually tell you a lot about the difference between the two. I just showed you the difference. Now, ultimately, they both did the same thing, right? So it's going to be a stylistic choice, whichever way you do it. The main consideration to think about is where your team is coming from, right? If your team is switching to React from an Angular background, you might find the class structure a little bit easier to learn. If you are brand new to React, then the functional one is the way to go because that's the way React is moving in the future. If you are coming to React from something that's object-oriented, class-based, but you are, going gung-ho into React, you're going forward with React, and you're ready and willing to learn, then go ahead and learn the functional side and do it on the functional component side, because once again, that's the way the future is going. That's kind of how you make that decision as a senior developer. Now, what if you're management or senior or higher? What other things would you consider? The things you'd want to consider here are the individual members of your team. What are their strengths and weaknesses? Some people might find, the usefulness of documentation. They're reading kind of learners. Then functional is the way to go because that's where all the documentation is going. Everything new is once again there. But at the same time, conversely, class-based has been around for a while, so you might not notice when you're working with one or the other when you're looking at a tutorial. The other things to consider is where's the business going? And that's the big thing that makes a difference between a senior developer and someone who's whichever title you might have above senior, whether that's senior 2, staff, principal, distinguished engineer. There's a ton of different titles for the people who kind of have the 11 plus years of experience. When you're trying to think more of the business, you want to think about hiring practices. What are we going to be able to hire for? And those people that we're going to be able to hire, how can we quickly get them integrated into our code base so that they can start delivering value? And the answer to that is going to be functional, because you're likely going to hire juniors, or you're going to hire people who are more along the lines of fresh out of a boot camp versus a full college or anything like that. And so those, where the industry is right now, is teaching people React, is teaching people React in the functional standpoint, because their type tend to be the latest and greatest. So using the latest and greatest in this way kind of works. But if your business at the same time is trying to deliver on a very quick and hard deadline, you're going to want to stick to what your team knows, because you have to deliver still. And so that's when you would choose class-based, or when you would choose to continue using Angular instead of React. So now that that's out of the way, this episode, I wanted to talk a little bit about code quality. So you had seen a little bit here where we've got some squiggly lines here and there. And we had some linting errors in the last one that we had to resolve. So I like to use the Airbnb style guide for linting. So let's go ahead and install that and see how that differs in our code base. So the reason you'd want to use a style guide is, once again, to be consistent. The more consistent your code is, the more developers can come in and out of your team, which means from a business standpoint, you can scale your team up so that when you need to add more developers, you can point into all of our code is wrote the exact same way so that someone can go in at any point of it and then go to another section of the code. This is especially good if you've got something like a mono repo or several smaller repos that are all React repos. If they all use the same standard, it's a lot easier for you to move your team members around in that sense. So in order to keep up with standards, what we want to do is use a style guide. So this is the React style guide from Airbnb. And this is this is done through ESLint. So this gives you all of the different types of things that are going on here. Now, something I want to point out here is one of the biggest ones here is that this was wrote back when class was still the standard. So React.create class, React.create class isn't what we use. We normally always extend a component, but in a class structure. Versus stateless components. So a stateless component tends to be this one where we just have a little bit of a render, right? So there's your function component right here. So if it was going to be stateless, they recommended you write it in the function syntax. And if it was going to have state, they had recommended writing it in the, sorry, I'm reading this backwards. If you have internal state, yeah. So if you had state, they wanted you to use the React.component. They wanted you to write it as a class if it had state. If it didn't have state, they wanted you to write it in a function component style. So that's going to be the big difference here. So this is something where we probably wouldn't use this style guide, because if we're going to go with the function way, it's just not going to work very well. So let's bring this in and see what happens to this file and this file. There was an install. Oh, you know what? We want to use this linter. However, we are using create React app. So let's go add Airbnb style guide to create React app. So someone has created a thing. Now, so the reason I have to look this up is because create React app doesn't give us much of anything in this root folder. So this is where you normally have your Webpack configuration, your Babel configuration, and all those other types of configs. Those obviously aren't here. So this is saying npm install ESLint config Airbnb. So we want the Airbnb config for ESLint. We want the ESLint config to work with Prettier. We want the rules for accessibility. We want the plugin to work with Prettier, and then we already have Prettier installed, so that's not going to do anything, but we'll do it anyways. So let's open up our terminal and run that command. And then we're going to have our ESLint file that we're going to have to make, because create React app .es, I think it's ESR, right? ESLint RC, ESLint RC. And we're just going to paste that in and save it. So this is going to, ESLint RC is a file that the ESLint plugin is going to look for. And then it's saying we want you to install all of these rule sets. Sorry, we want you to extend all of these rule sets. And then we added JS and JSX extensions for ourselves. So our package installed, that's great. This guy's telling you over here. No, we don't need to run a linting, that's fine. We don't really need to run it before every git command. And we're not working with those two pieces there. Okay, so let's just close these files. Let's check our ESLint. It didn't get the prettier React lint config. Where is our prettier? This install from this tutorial doesn't work. Or we're missing something. So create React app already comes with the ESLint. Yeah, we saw that. Yeah, so we want to extend its configuration. And so it's having a problem getting prettier React. Did our npm fail on prettier React? Ah, we didn't install prettier React, so oops. I don't remember what my password is for GitHub. Let's see if anyone left a comment on there. Let's get our peer dependencies. Setting up these build systems is often like this, where it's like one thing after the other. ESLint plugin React hooks, ES plugin React, GSX ally plugin import, Airbnb. Let's get our correct configurations installed. Good, we updated the package. This should be giving us a lot of errors, so something's up. All else fails. Reboot. Nope, we are not including Prettier React. Well, and the problem is also Airbnb is only for JavaScript. We need Airbnb for React. You'll see here. Where in the world is the install information for this darn thing? Writing good documentation is a skill set that people should master. This is beyond annoying. This is what we deal with every day as developers. ESLint, Airbnb, React. This is what we want. Oh, and we've added hooks. That's good. Extends Airbnb. Yep, there we go. Let's also add hooks so that we can okay, we should be linting. There we go. Now we're linting. That's better. Okay, now there is a way to set Prettier to fix linting errors that it can. But now let's take a look at what we've got going on here. Yeah, so see how this is using double quotes and it wants us to use single quotes? That's where we can let Prettier do that for us. Let's add Prettier back in. And Prettier React, and let's see what we need to do to get that to work. Well, in doing that, we managed to get rid of all of our linting errors. That is not what we want to do. We want these errors. We just want to be able to fix them. Ooh, a carriage return. Oh, well, we are not using the right types of returns. So let's fix that for one, because we are on Windows and we were trying to go in there. And so look, we have an unused name. So we didn't use this, so it wants us to get rid of it. It doesn't want trailing semicolons. I don't really like that. I prefer trailing semicolons. See, you can actually see that let's go with ESLint, Airbnb, React with Prettier. We want them to work cohesively. There is a setting that we need to do that I don't quite remember. Yep, we've created a React app. Yeah, there we go, the prettier plugin. That's what it's going to be. We do not have the plugin installed. That should be npm install prettier, ESLint config prettier, ESLint plugin prettier, and that -d is for save dev. Plugin prettier recommended. Oops. And we can create our prettier file. We're going to use single quotes. We're going to have the trailing comma. See how it automatically changed that from a double to a single quote? Now we've got some weirdness going on. All right, we copy pasted, so let's get rid of his configuration or his rules. We don't want any of the custom rules right now. We just want and we actually didn't need the plugins. Make VS Code auto format every time you save. This is the fun part. ESLint autofix on save. Disable formatting in the JS file. We'll format through ESLint. No, that sounds stupid. Okay, so what do we got here? Called immediately after a component is mounted. Setting state here will trigger re-rendering. Ooh. Interesting. This one, called immediately after updating occurred, not called. Oh, I read the wrong thing. I didn't read the error. Expected blank line between class members. So it's one of those things that really should be able to be auto-fixed, but that's all I wanted. A blank line. Here, replace with double quotes. No, okay, so I'm going to close this and reopen it. Sometimes with VS Code, I've found that settings don't necessarily click in all the way. Yeah, so see how that's gone now, because it was picking up prettier/prettier, and we didn't want prettier/prettier. We just wanted these ones. Okay, so if we click through to here, we get this lovely setup. So prevent missing prop validation in React component definition React prop types. And so this will actually lead us into TypeScript. So JSX is not allowed in files with .js. That's correct. We should be using JSX and TSX so that we get proper formatting. Unexpected console statement, yep, because we don't want to put console logs into our code. C-spell doesn't know the word to-dos, that's fine. This wants a type, so we'll get to that in a minute. Must use destructuring state assignment. All right, so this is where what we should have done here is const count is this.props, but I don't actually need to make a separate const. I can just put it into here. Title and count. And then instead here we can just do count. And then we fix that. Now this is just saying that we don't have a prop type, so that's fine. Missing an explicit type attribute for button. Right, so this is an accessibility thing. So our button should be of type button. Okay, and then once again, this should be count now instead. Yeah, so we want to use destructuring. So it should be count. Prevent definitions of unused state. Warns you if you have defined a property on the state, but is not being used anywhere. This.setState. Unused state field count. Yes, we are using it. It's right here. Oh, because I did this.props. That's why. I was right the first time. So destructuring is used for both props and state. So this should be this title count equals this.state. So we destructure our state. And then this should be count. And then there we go. That's fixed. And then this will be to-dos. Which is also in our state. And there we go. We've linted this file, minus the prop doesn't have a type. Now let's take a look at our file here, which once again, we want it to be a JSX file. We're just going to hit save. It's going to update a lot of the problems that we'd have by default. We should be using the Unix file statement. There we go. Okay, so this is complaining because we have it in here and we're not using it. So yes, let's get rid of it. Same with here. We have it and we're not using it. Let's get rid of it. Buttons need to have a type. It's the type of button. And ta-da, look at that. Linted. Now we've got hooks here. Let's take a look at Airbnb hooks and see what's it at, because I've never actually used it before. So Airbnb lint hooks. So we want to check that it's working. So let's try and break it so that we can check that it works. That took us to the exact same spot that's on NPM. Getting a little low on light. That is a massive header image. I don't think they've updated this documentation to include hooks yet. React. I don't see it. I just gotta be careful with my chair. My puppy is right at the bottom of my feet. I do not want to roll over him. But we always got to check our posture. Okay, so there we managed to lint. So now let's move on to TypeScript. So let's add TypeScript to our Create React app. Now we already created our React app, so we want to install TypeScript. Okay, good. Let's do it. Now, why TypeScript? So let's bring up TypeScript's documentation. The reason you want to use something like TypeScript is that when you have a module-based code like we do, where this component and this component could pull in something from various different spots or different APIs, you want to make sure that what you're getting is what you expected. And if it's not, that you alert the developer that you've changed something that was expected to be something else. So that lets you know that you either need to go change the other thing to update that to what you were expecting, or go and refactor what you're working on or make something new out of it. Now with React, they had types a long time ago with PropTypes, which is actually what this is complaining about here is the title here, that title doesn't have a prop type. Prop types are largely, I think, replaced by TypeScript and a little mix-in. Prop types are at runtime. So when you define the title as a prop of string, and let's say on the previous input, let's say you're populating title based off an input, like you're submitting a blog post, and someone types in numbers. And the developer coded that in as an input of number, and we saved that into the database as number, and then we got it back from the database as a number, and then we got to this component, and this component says title should be a string. What's going to happen then is the user will see in the browser that there is an error. That's what prop types do, is that's runtime type checking. TypeScript is compile time type checking. So in that instance, you're going to see that error while you're developing with your types connected. However, the user would never see it. The user would just get an error and they wouldn't know what went wrong. So having both prop types and TypeScript interfaces and types is useful. However, writing both of them is a little overkill. And if we have time, let's see if we can manage to get them to play well together. But you'll see here, property name does not exist on type first name string, last name string, role string. So console.log user.name. You'll see the user object here has a first name, a last name, and a role. And so user here, excuse me, has this lovely little interface. So that's the easiest way to explain TypeScript right there on their own homepage and why we would want to use it. Okay, so we have installed TypeScript. You're not required to make a tsconfig file. One will be made for you. You're allowed to edit the file generating TypeScript configuration. I don't think it makes that file for us when we did this by start. Next, rename any file to a TypeScript file. Okay, so now we're going to change this from a JSX to a TSX, which is TypeScript file with JSX inside of it. Now we got some new linting errors. You see this super here. An argument for props was not provided. Expected one to two arguments, but got 0. So React in itself has types installed. And so that's what we're seeing here is that when we did super, the React constructor for React.component is expecting props. An argument for props was not provided. So this would then be this dot props. Sorry, it might just be props. I'll come back to that one. I don't know how to fix that right now. doesn't know the word, that's fine. And then here we have constant title. Title does not exist on type. Read-only children. So our props don't have any types. So it's telling us that title doesn't exist. And our state does not have any types. So it's telling us our count and our to-dos don't exist. So let's add in some TypeScript. Woo! This is very unreadable. Nice. Okay, so TypeScript and React. That's where we already were. I just wanted an example. Okay, so we're going to need an interface. An interface tells us what our structure should be. So let's say interface class API example state, and we wanted to extend our React regular state so that we get all of the regular stuff from state. So nope, that's not what I wanted. I want component dot. No, why are you putting this in there? I wanted to extend our components state. I constantly forget syntax. I just need an example and I am good to go. Sure, well, let's just make our state. So we're gonna have count, and count will be a number. And we're going to have to-dos, and to-dos will be an array. Now, an array in itself is not a very good piece of, it's not a great definition of a TypeScript thing. But this.state, and we're going to tell it to be class API example state as its type. I forget the syntax yet again. Of how I tell it what I want it to look like. Oh, TypeScript for React state. Interface state, player pause, optional class. Ah, that's what we wanted. Okay, so React.component. And so we need an interface for both our props and our state. This will be our props, and you'll saw below that we had a title. Our title is also going to be a string, and our component wants our props. And so now if we hover over this here, you'll see P equals an object and S equals an object. So that's our props and our state. So our component should be using class API example props and class API example state. There we go. So now we see the property of count is a number. So when we use React's this.state and React's this.props, these are automatically brought into here. Ta-da! Now see down here, todos.id. ID does not exist on... To-do has a type of never for some reason, but... So that's why this is pretty useless. So when we do to-do here, what we can do is make another interface of our to-dos. And I don't remember what this API returns. So let's hit it. We're going to copy this. Easiest way to make an interface. Copy your object. And then replace this with the type. That's a number. That's a number. That's a string. And that's a string. Save it, auto-formatted it. Done. Bam. Now to-dos is going to be an array of to-dos. So our interface of to-dos here. I've got the name to-dos in here way too many times. So let me just take a better name for this. So now when we come down here to to-dos, we're going to want to say that to-dos are optional. This.state is to-dos. Then down here, you'll see that to-do.title is valid, and it's a string. To-do.body is valid, and it's a string. And count is valid, and count is a number. Great. So now let's just fix this here. An argument for props was not provided. I actually don't remember how to fix this error. Oh, it just wants me to say, oh, I need to pass the props. That's why. Derp. Props and props. There we go. So this just takes the props from the parent, etc., passes them on, allows us to act on them. Okay, so now we want to make our initial to-dos to be empty. So this is telling us that the expected type comes from property to-dos, which is declared here on type read-only class API example state. Type blank is not assignable to type to-dos interface. Source has 0 elements, but target required 1. So let's go React, state, TypeScript, initial empty state. I don't remember how you would write the interface for this alarm. Oh, I got this backwards. That's probably why. There we go. Now it's happy. So to-dos. So that question mark means whether that it's optional. So to-dos is going to be, it's going to use the to-dos interface, and then that's going to be in an array. The syntax should be what I wrote, but it's not, and it bothers me and screws me up all the time. But now we have added TypeScript to our API here, our class here. So now there is a cool handy thing to convert these to also prop types. So TypeScript interface to prop types. And remember, prop types are going to be runtime, etc. Oh, hi Ben. Ben has actually spoken at one of my events before. So you'll see here, prop types and an interface. They look very much the same, right? Now you don't have to define prop types. And a lot of the times if you have TypeScript, you can kind of skip defining a prop type. And so what Ben is going over here is saying that, when you write prop types, you need an interface for your prop types, right? So because everything in TypeScript needs to have a type, and therefore your prop types also need to be typed, even though they are also a type. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is largely, probably should just define them on your own, just to be safe instead of auto-generating them. But there you have it. We have created a better quality code through the use of linting and the use of types. The use of linting makes sure that our code is consistent and that everybody's committing formatted, correct code. The reason we use linting, and then we're using the Airbnb style guide because it's one of the largest widely regarded style guides out there. However, experiment with ESLint rules and do what's right for your team. Remember that these are largely all stylistic, so getting into an argument over them is largely moot. Whether or not you want tabs or spaces, commas or semicolons, dangling semicolons, extra lines between spaces, none of this matters when it comes to compile time to go to production, so don't lose sleep over it. If there's an argument, try and come to a consensus. That's where your senior dev should be coming in. What you want to achieve is consistency. If you have arguments of style, then you need to move beyond that. Then when it comes to using TypeScript, you want to type everything. The type of any should only be used during development so that you can just get it out there and get it on the screen, and then go back in and anywhere you have the any type, give it an interface. You also have the ability to do enums. I'm still learning enums, honestly, but that's essentially where this is open-ended, right? What's going to be inside of this is going to be different based off the API call. If it is preset like a constant, you can use an enum because it's always going to be one of these three things. Go ahead, use an enum. I don't have a good example to write them out here today. When our code is consistent, when our code is consistent, our teams are scalable. When our code is typed, it is also scalable, so that when we go and add more developers in. When we go in and spin up new instance of it, it always works the same way because it has been tested, because the types are the same way. We still need to cover some testing in the future. I got to learn more about testing still. In the 12 years I've done it, I've written a few tests, quite honestly. I work with an amazing QA staff that write better test cases than I do. We also should be covering, let's make a little bit of an app, right? So this is a thing. I think in our next video, though, we're going to take this ugly app that we made and make it pretty, and take a look at some different component libraries and how React differs when you're actually writing HTML with components. So until then, I hope this was helpful in showing you how we think about why you would choose TypeScript, why you would choose ESLint, why you would choose class over function, or why would you choose function over class components, and getting you to think beyond the code and into the business is how you're going to exceed further in your career past that 10-year mark. Otherwise, you're probably going to get stuck at senior developer for a long time. Which there's nothing wrong with that. If that's where you want to be there, do it. But I get asked all the time, what's it take to go up? What it takes is business sense. So let's get you there. Make sure you like, subscribe, and stay tuned to the next stream. I love doing this live. I just turn it on and I just go. You see how my brain works. You see that I Google everything. Developers Google things all the time. I'm on Stack Overflow. I'm everywhere. Half the time I don't read it. I'm just looking at it. I just want a piece of example code to refresh my memory of all the things I've learned, because there's so much stuck in there, right? I'm not a dictionary. I don't have as much RAM as this physical computer does. So we will see you next time. Cheers. It's time to take the puppy out because he walked away from my feet. So that means he's going to go pee somewhere and I don't want to clean it up. So bye.